This will be about software solutions to enable virtual design and construction. I'm really excited we're going to begin with a live demo. So with that, I'll welcome to the presentation stage Nick Nisbet, the director of AEC3 Limited. So welcome, Nick, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, and thanks for coming back. Okay, I'm going to try and show you some new software that AEC3 has been developing, and I'm hoping it'll work. And it's aimed at addressing a big gap in the way that we do BIM, the way we do virtual design and construction, the way we do digital twins, probably. We don't take requirements seriously. We don't take regulations seriously. We hope that we will pass the inspections. We hope that the client won't notice that we've changed the number of bedrooms in the hotel that we're designing. We do a lot of things that are really not, they're not systems engineering, that's for sure. And although I'll say more about the background tomorrow, I worked on the Singapore E-Plan check system 15 years ago, which completely automated the checking of the architectural, zoning, civil defense, parking requirements, so that you could get permission within 20 or 30 minutes of submitting a design. We thought it was important, and it turned out to be a dead end. So there are a number of reasons for that, we've got a situation now where we've been doing BIM, well, I've been doing BIM for 42 years. It's really been high on people's agenda for perhaps 10 or 12 years. And we haven't got round to making sure we're doing the right thing. And I think that's a gap that needs to be looked at. So I'm showing you a BIM model of an office building. It's called the Monument Office Building because it's next door to Monument in the centre of the City of London, a big pillar that commemorates the Great Fire of London. Anyway, it's a new office building. It was designed about 4 years ago, and the designers and contractor were generous enough to share this model with us. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. All I really want to do is to draw your attention to the front door. It's actually it's quite hard to see because this is such a bad model and there's no ground for this building to sit in, and there are a few bits missing. But that front door is a key ingredient, and it is subject to regulation. In the UK, it's called Part M, and it controls the access to public buildings, etc. Okay. Next thing I want to show you is one clause from Part M. I hope you can't read it, because it would take an awful long time to get through it. But there is a regulation called Part M. It's an approved document that supplements the legislation, and it talks about accessible entrances, making sure that people with mobility difficulties can get in and out of buildings, and so on. And it's quite complicated, and it involves all sorts of things about whether it's self-closing door or power-operated door. It's about whether it's a single leaf or double leaf door. It's about the direction of approach to the door, and how wide that door has to be fair to people with less mobility. It's complicated. So we know that very often people chance it and wait to see if the inspectors actually object to a design. And we're getting more and more regulations, and we're getting more and more client requirements, and we're also getting more and more recommendations from insurance companies, from environmental recommendations, all sorts of things are accumulating. But we're not doing systems engineering. We're not taking requirements and checking them continuously against our designs. Now, Peter Powell's is in the room or nearby, so I have to be careful what I say. But to date, there's been lots of small pieces of research on individual regulations and requirements. People have taken one sentence and written whole master's theses about checking compliance of that one sentence. There's also a commercial product which has a lot of small rules in it which you might be able to use. But actually, none of these address the real problem. And that's why AEC3 has developed a tool, or is developing a tool called Require1. And I'm going to try and demonstrate it now. And it's a if the keyboard will work, yes, good. It's a workbench for capturing any requirements. Let's see if it'll run. Excuse me a moment. This could be the worst day of my life. Good. So, Require1 is a workbench. That is to say, it's a collection of tools, I suppose, or steps that you would go through to take any regulation, any requirement document, and make it checkable. In other words, to take knowledge that's embedded in text and make it operable. We may want to make it operable as a checking process. We may want to make it operable as something that actually drives the design process. If we think of, for example, a staircase, we would rather, if the tools will allow us, we'd rather design a proper, legal, comfortable staircase than design a staircase and then be told that it's not none of those things later. So how we go about this is that we take any requirements document that's available. Just let me see it. Good. Sorry, it's dependent on access to the internet, which is not tremendously fast. So there we go. Right. What I want to show you is that same provision. Now it's web page, it's HTML, and we have not put it through natural language processing. We have not given it to a programmer to understand. What we have here is a very simple tool that allows us to highlight the words and clauses in this document in one of four colors. And this is a rather useful result that no matter how complicated the sentences in your regulations get, we only ever need four colors to mark up the words that appear in it. It's not the same problem as coloring up maps, but it's nice that it's also four colors. This whole technique was invented on a plane flying towards Disneyland, where luckily they sell sets of four coloring pencils. And so that's the history of the colors. What we have to do, what we're asking people to do, is to identify all the nouns and adjectives that are in the document. And see if I can just highlight this. Let me just try once more. This is inevitable. Right. Okay, the first noun or adjective in this document is door. I've highlighted it in green, which means that it's about the applicability of the regulation. You won't be so, that's fairly obvious from what I've told you already. And all we've added to it is just confirmation that the word door is to be tested whether a door actually exists in the model. It's a very simple example. Other examples of things that we've highlighted is that there is an exception, let's see if I can call it up, relating for security. You can argue that maybe you shouldn't provide automatic doors if there's an issue about security. So that word has it has some little tags on it just to explain what it is. The point about this markup is that anyone can do it. In particular, the expert, the people who know the regulations well, have no difficulty in applying these 4 colors to the document for us. If it was a client brief, you could get the client to mark it up, and so on and so forth. And that's all they need to do, because from that simple fact that we have highlighted the nouns and adjectives, or adjectival phrases, or whatever they happen to be, we get a number of results. Let's see. This had to happen, didn't it? Ah, right. Okay. That is a very ugly statement. It's one sentence that summarizes the legislation we were looking at. It's in a form called Predicate Logic, and it's been generated completely automatically from the markup that we've done. It gives us the exact logical statement of what constitutes passing that clause. However complicated it's got, and it's got quite complicated, as you can see, that is exactly what the legislation says. Now, of course, each of the phrases there has to mean something. So we'll come back to that. But just to show some other ideas, we can automatically generate procedural code, Visual Basic, showing my age there, C++, Java, what's the program language of the day, whatever it happens to be. We can automatically generate that code. We can also generate IFC constraint models, which is a small part of the IFC that not many people use. So we can communicate to existing rules engines. Let me just see. We can also play it back as almost plain English. It's not going to win any literary prizes, but we can echo back exactly what the markup has found, what the markup means, back as a set of plain English or nearly plain English sentences. Just a couple of other things. We can get a table of all the individual phrases that have been marked up. And these are the things that we call metrics, the things that we might go and look at a building model to find the information. We might not have a building model, and I'll come to that a bit later. So that's a quick summary of the phrases. And perhaps another way of looking at it is as a tree of decisions. And there they are laid out, all generated automatically from that markup. So however you want to consume this, you can. An earlier version of this produced DMN, which is decision modeling notation. Another version produced Drools, which is a Java rules engine language. But actually, we don't have to depend on anyone else, because what we have as the next part of the workbench is a dictionary. Now, the role of the dictionary, and I'm thinking here of a 2 or 3 language dictionary, is to say there may be phrases in the legislation or whatever you're marking up, and they may need explanation. So we can associate to that phrase an English sentence or a longer phrase explaining what any particular one is. Why do we want to do that? Well, if we don't have a BIM, where are we going to get this information from? We're going to have to ask the user. So it's really nice to have associated to any of the phrases that we found the English question you'd want to ask a human, as a real person. And I'm not biased towards English, although that's the only language I speak. We found this works in French. We found it works in Chinese, and we found it works in Korean. So we're sort of feeling confident that language is not an issue. The other reason for having a dictionary and being able to add terms and develop them is that we might have a BIM. And if we have a BIM, we need to talk to the BIM in a language. Now, ideally, that would be IFC. But if we had a different kind of database, it might be a different kind of query. So the second part of the workbench is to allow people to amplify any of the phrases that have come up in the requirements document, and just make sure that there is a mapping to keep things going. That's job done. You get the rules and you get the words. What can you do with it? You can set up a project. And you can say, I've got a project, which is the monument building, and it is represented in this case by one IFC file, which is the architect's IFC file. Sorry. And we want to test it against the UK building regulations, approved document M, clause 213. Now, it could be the whole of section 2 of part M. It could be the whole of part M. It could be the whole building regulations as established in the UK. It could be any chunk that we choose, and so on. So we set it up. The other thing that's happening on this form, and I apologize for the size of the text, which is even smaller than usual, is that we can identify the people involved with the project. Who needs to be notified of any results, and who can provide corrections if there's anything that we need to know. But we'll press on and just hit the analysis and say, run the analysis, please. Okay. The good news is that the monument building in EC1 in London has passed. But that's never enough, is it? Whether we pass or fail, we want to know the reasons why. So we can get a summary of all the objects of interest and whether they individually have passed or failed. We can get a really bold summary. This is evaluated to true. That's the good news. We can actually go in deeper and get a report that says what made it pass. And so there's a list here of the clauses and the facts and the objects that have been used to decide that it has passed. And then there's a really long-winded version that goes on and on and on and tracks every single decision it made to reach that conclusion. Now, what have we achieved? Yeah, part M2, clause 13 is not the only clause we need to worry about. But it doesn't matter what regulation, what requirements document you put in at the front end. You just mark it up with those 4 colors. Make sure your dictionary is up to date, which might be the role of a regulatory expert or people who are used to interpreting and explaining the regulations, or it might have a role that you want to get someone in from the IFC world or the semantic web world or somewhere to express a query. But as soon as you've done those 2 things, any requirements document becomes checkable. So at last, we can actually have a world where we can confirm that we are meeting requirements, and we can confirm it at the start of every morning, or every day, or every week, or every client meeting. You can say, this project is on track. We know what we are doing. If it gave a fail, it would list the reasons why. But there's a third possibility that I need to mention, which is unknown. What if the information isn't in the BIM that you need to decide this? And it's quite normal. It's the case early in the design project. There'll be many things that are unknown. First thing, we track the unknowns. And if they really, really, really matter, they show up in the list saying, I can't give you an answer because these things are unknown. And that can go out as a message to the design team saying, we're not getting an answer because these things haven't been decided. We can ask the users, what do you think? Can you provide this information? And in a form, they can provide the missing information back again. Of course, people will learn, and they'll learn to put the right information in, but we can never know before we start exactly what information is required. It's in the nature of regulations that we turn off, or we have alternative ways of passing, or we turn off sections because it's a different building type, or we look, and maybe we run out of options and there's no way of passing this thing. And then we have to say, oh, there's a clause there that says, unless approved directly by the building control officer. That's still a piece of information which we probably won't find an answer to in the BIM, but we can at least pose the question and forward it to the building control office, saying, do you approve of this design? So we've got a mechanism now that says that we can move from the rather haphazard and chaotic means that we achieve client satisfaction, social acceptability, and legal permission, and so on. And any BIM project, and we could take out the IFC engine and put a different engine in, and we could do law, or we could do accountancy decisions. But we've actually shifted the dial, I hope, to say we can now capture regulations, requirements, recommendations, and make them operable as quickly as we need to. Okay. So perhaps I should conclude by showing you that lovely door there, which is, however chaotic the model, that door is fully compliant. Okay. Thanks.